fun for me to be here with all of you. And I want to give a big hearty thanks to Peggy Gray, who has been our faithful videographer. Yay, Peggy!
Oh, you're welcome, everyone.
And I also want to thank Diane Greenwood, who has helped me set up every week, which has been really nice. And to all of you who have been here, and all of you who are watching on video every week. And thank you for all your good comments. I've really appreciated that a lot. So, and if anybody has any feedback, I'd be interested in hearing that too. All right, so this week we're way out of any sort of chronology with this in a way, but I saved Jainism to last because it's my favorite. Now, as a Jew, I probably shouldn't say that, but there are things about Jainism that I just absolutely adore and identify with at a very deep level. That being said, I would never be a practicing Jain, and you will understand why once we start talking about what that means. How many of you are familiar with Jainism at all? Oh, that makes it even more fun.
Very vaguely.
That makes it even more fun.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, yes. So Jainism arose in India, in northern India, and in a very close time parallel to the rise of Buddhism, which is interesting. It's almost like there's some overlap in the stories between Jainism and Buddhism. Now, as we said with Hinduism, it's older than dirt, you know, it just goes back to where nobody knows. Jainism, although we count the beginning of the era of Jainism that is recognizable to us today as starting with a teacher by the name of Mahavira, and he was 6th century BCE. So he would have been, if not a contemporary of Buddha, in the same time frame as Buddha. And relatively in the same area, and also from the same caste, from the same clan as Buddha, from the Kshatriya or warrior caste. He was a prince. However, he is referred to as the 24th Tirthankara of this cosmic cycle. Now, that literally means something like ford builder, not like, you know, a ford obviously, but you know, like a bridge or something that crosses. So Jainism does not look at the universe as having been created in any way. That it does not have a beginning and it does not have an end. It exists in endless cycles. Endless repeating cycles of building up and declining, building up and declining. So Mahavira is understood within Jainism to be the final Tirthankara of this particular cosmic cycle, which means that we are in a place of great decline. We are, the end of a cosmic cycle is not a good place to be in a way. The world is going to be a mess. And it's during this time, and these cycles are long, obviously, right? Because this is like 2,600 years ago. These cycles are very long. And it's understood that towards the end of these cosmic cycles is when religious or spiritual teachers arise and come because they're more needed, because people are in such great distress. The goal of Jainism is achieving kind of this enlightenment and release from the cycle of reincarnation. We'll get more into that later. But they believe that right now we're in such a state of decline in the cosmos, in this cycle, that people are really not even able to reach enlightenment. It's such a rugged time. But it will be renewed. All will come around again and be refreshed. Yeah, so.
How accurate are these predictions of what they say?
I mean, the cycles are so long, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that there's no way. This is cosmology. This is myth. This is how they see the world. It's not something that can be historically proven, because within our realm of history, it's just way too huge and long, okay? Now, there is he was an actual historical figure, and the 22nd and 23rd Tirthankara were probably actual people that, can be put within history. The 23rd lived like 700 to 800 BCE, all right? So he is seen as the greatest teacher, however, of what they look at as the modern age, the recent age of Jainism. Now, as we heard from other great spiritual teachers, he was seen as being very remarkable as a child. Have we heard this before?
Mhm.
Right? Jesus was remarkable as a child. He astounded the teachers in the temple by his wisdom. Buddha was very, extraordinary as a child. And same thing with him. He had these extraordinary powers. At age 30, he left his home. He left everything behind. He gave up all of his possessions, and he began serious fasting. Now, does this parallel in some ways with what we heard of with Buddha? He gave up all his possessions, including his clothing. Okay, this is one aspect of Jainism that is quite interesting. He pulled out all of his hair.
Oh,
Pulled out all of his hair and became a beggar and practiced this extreme asceticism for 12 years. It's said that he spent just great amounts of time in meditation without any clothing on, just like day after day after day after day. And there's a story that he was sitting in a village in meditation, and he did not bathe for 12 years. And the villagers were so disgusted by him, they were trying to get rid of him, so they were poking him and prodding him, and actually moved to the point of lifting him up and like throwing him around, and he still did not respond to this. He didn't come out of his meditative pose. So he was big time, he was a big time ascetic person. He carefully avoided killing anything. And this is one of the hallmarks of Jainism, is they are absolute non-violent pacifists. They don't kill anything. To the point, and that was his bathing thing. That's why he didn't want to bathe, lest he kill things on his skin. He wouldn't even scratch, lest he kill something on his skin, all right? So this is why I'm never going to be a Jain. But he finally reached what in Jainism is called Kevala, which is a type of enlightenment where he was released from the cycle of endless reincarnation, like Buddha did at the end of this period of asceticism. And at that point, that's when he became the Tirthankara. Another name for that is a Jaina, which is where the name Jainism comes from. And Jaina is like one who conquers the wheel of existence. Now, I was pointing out, you weren't all here, but the symbol of the swastika, which of course was adopted by our non-friends, the Nazis, is actually a Jain symbol. And that was their symbol for the wheel of reincarnation. And I think they still use it. I mean, that was their symbol from time immemorial, and I don't really know how the Nazis came to use it.
Except it spins the other way.
Yeah, it is, it's backwards, yep. But isn't that interesting? I think it'd be interesting to look up the history. But part of me doesn't even really want to know.
There was some real interest in astrology and those kinds of things on the part of Hitler.
Mhm.
no.
A lot of,
Yeah, so I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know what the answer to that is. But, so this is of all the traditions, this in some sense, those who practice it to the extreme is by far the most extreme tradition that I've ever heard of. So they believe, as we mentioned, in reincarnation. They also believe in karma. so that our deeds, our choices for good or ill are with us, and we take them with us to our next incarnation. Now, they believe that we can have tens of thousands of different incarnations. Tens of thousands. And partly of that is because their perspective of time is really just not even relative to our perspective of time.
So when you talk tens of thousands, it means these could be people living at the same time that are reincarnations of one person.
Wait, I don't understand
Well,
what you're saying.
usually you think of reincarnation, you die and you're reborn as somebody else. Could you die and be reborn as 10 different people?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But I know it's not necessarily a person. It could
Yeah,
be a
well,
rock.
an entity.
Some sort of a being. So,
No, I was,
you were just fixing your
So
chapeau?
that's why you wouldn't want to hurt or anybody or kill anything, because they've been reincarnated depending on their.
That's exactly right. That's right. Everything that exists has this spiritual reality to it. There's nothing that's not, even air. So, now the Jain perspective on karma, I think is very interesting. Now, as we listen to this, think about the fact that Jains see their teachings as absolutely in harmony with physics, with the latest discoveries of physics. When these things continue to be discovered, the Jains are like, yeah, that's what we have been teaching all along, all right? So they believe that the soul, which is something that exists in the body, when we make choices and do things in our lives that are in violation of what their basic principles are, and we'll get into more of those later, there is like particles that adhere to our soul, particles of darkness, and they refer to it as dark light. Now, as those of us who have studied physics know, light can exist as either a wave or a particle. So it's almost like the idea of dark matter, which is also an idea within physics that adheres to whatever it is that our soul is. And the more negative choices, the more harm, the more things of that nature you do in your life, the dimmer and darker your soul becomes. And of course, that is a downward spiral, because the less clear, the less you can see the good, you kind of lose a sense of what is good. It causes a distorted view of reality, leads to further misconduct, and eventually to re-embodiment or reincarnation at a lower level on the basis of your past actions. So there is a potential of reincarnating as fire, mineral, air, plant, animal, human, and what they call God bodies, which are more advanced spiritual beings. Very interesting. I think that idea of the soul, and I mean, even as a metaphor, it's a powerful idea to me, that our actions actually have a physical impact on our body. And this not only has an impact on the further choices that we make, but it affects our health, it affects everything about us. And I mean, I don't know, I've seen this in people, almost this darkness in people, you know, that, I mean, certainly we all have this to a greater or lesser degree, but the goal is to not accumulate this debris, but there is the possibility always of turning it around, of, in a sense, cleaning this soul. Now, there are writings of Jainism. There are Jainist teachings, which are very interesting, and the main kind of collection is called the Agamas. And these were written down after the life of Mahavira, after he died, and there's a couple different versions of them, because guess what? There are two main denominations, you might say, or sects within Jainism, of course, right? Now, the thing that's a little bit different about Jainism is that it took from when he died to about the year 300 CE before there was a schism within Jainism. So I think they set a record for waiting the longest time before they had a schism, but how this happened and the outcome of it is really very interesting. So they were still headquartered in northern India. They hadn't spread out a lot at this point. And there was a prediction by one of their teachers that there was going to be a famine, a drought and a famine in northern India. So about 12,000 of the group decided that they would move temporarily to southern India away from the area where this famine and drought was predicted, which indeed did happen, but there was a group who stayed behind. So 12 years later, the group that moved, the 12,000 who moved south, returned and were highly dismayed to find out that those who had remained behind had changed some of their practices. They had introduced some innovations, such as the wearing of clothing, and they had convened a council. We know nothing ever good comes of councils, right? And had come up with a different version of the sacred texts. They had edited them in a way that those who left for 12 years were very disgruntled with. So now we had a schism which has existed until today. So those who are the ones who went away and are really the kind of fundamentalist or more extreme Jains, and they do still exist today, although in very small numbers. Now, I don't think probably outside of India. They are known as the Digambara. They are characterized by not wearing any clothing. One of their nicknames is the sky-clad Jains, because they believe that they are clad in the atmosphere. Okay? Their only possessions are a water gourd for drinking and a fan of peacock feathers, which they pick up off the ground. They wouldn't want to actually take it from a peacock. What they use the peacock feathers for is when they're walking, they sweep the ground in front of them lest they step on an insect. And all their food, they beg for food, or some of them even will, the only thing they will eat is food, like fruit that they find on the ground, things that have already fallen from plants. So these are, really considered like the monks and the nuns, very people who have absolutely, obviously devoted their life to Jainism. Because you can't walk around without clothing on and carry on any sort of a real life. They also have very conservative ideas about women in this version. They believe that women are not capable of achieving enlightenment. Like being a woman is some sort of a reincarnational punishment. Yes, we know that's not true. And so women can't achieve full enlightenment until they're reincarnated as a male. But there is an order of nuns within this group, a very small order of nuns, but this is not a big group. Oh, and we mentioned that worldwide there are 12 million Jains? No, 5 million Jains. 5 million Jains, and most of them are in India. Although there is a Jain Society of Minnesota.
And I would imagine that at certain times of the year, it would be really difficult to be naked.
Yeah, and not in Minnesota for
Yeah,
sure.
in Minnesota.
In
Well,
northern,
like I said, Minnesota, this really wouldn't go over.
well,
very well.
northern India, I don't think is probably either a warm place either. And they are, part of their commitment is to just be absolutely oblivious to possession, to their outside circumstance. They just do not find that of any significance whatsoever. And the degree that you can release yourself from any sort of connection to the material world Yeah, Martha?
Yeah, I was just wondering how they propagate themselves. I mean, it's hard in this context of this, as you
Yeah,
described.
I
it.
know.
How do they have sex? And babies?
Well, they're not wearing clothing, so it'd be very
Yeah.
convenient.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, I think they do commit themselves to complete celibacy. So it's not through reproduction that this group grows. And this is a small group. The main group of Jains, and these are people who are function in the world, and there are many very successful Jains. Very successful in finance, banking, very wealthy. So these folks generally will wear white. They wear clothing, but they wear white clothing. And women are fully accepted. In fact, they believe that the 19th Tirthankara, Jina, was a woman. So they completely think that women are as capable of enlightenment as men. They have beautiful temples in India, beautiful artistic temples, and their art has had a profound influence on art in India and really around the world. And the principle, and this is true throughout Jainism, the principle of ahimsa, and we'll talk more about this later, which is nonviolence, was influential on Hinduism. It kind of reformed Hinduism in that way, and also was very important to Gandhi. So he drew some of his teachings of nonviolence from Jain teachings. So as I mentioned before, they have no sense of a creator type God, no sense really of a God in the way that monotheistic traditions do. There's certainly spirit afoot in the universe, but no identifiable God type figure. The universe just is and has always existed and always will exist. And it goes, as we mentioned before, in these endless cycles of evolution and degeneration. So, what do? They venerate the Jinas, the Tirthankaras. They actually will pray to them. Since there is no God, so to speak, they connect with these souls, these great souls who have been here and have passed but still continue to exist. So they do have that sort of a practice of prayer. And they have in their temples, they do have statuary, and they bring offerings to, so in that sense it would be reminiscent of Hinduism. I would love to go to India sometime and see the Jain temples. They really believe that their principles are congruent with modern physics and can be scientifically investigated. So they see no division in any way between what we would call like science and religion, or the secular and the religious or the spiritual. They all is one. And I mean, there's something to be said for that. If truth is truth, whatever kind of truth it is, if it's scientific truth or spiritual truth, it has to be coherent with other types of truth, right? I mean, I don't think there's separate realms of truth that are incompatible, you know what I'm saying? That's very philosophical, but I believe it's true. So they see the universe as three-dimensional, and it's often pictured as a human form with three different levels. So that's one of their ways of representing the universe, which is also done in what other spiritual tradition?
wow.
Kabbalah. Yeah, that's right. So there's definitely some interplay or compatibility between Jainist teachings and Jewish mystical teachings. And that's I mean, when we look at that representation of the Sphirot, you can't really see it from this representation, but this is often, the 10 Sphirot are often represented as a human form. So this would be kind of the head, arms, heart, this section of the body, legs and the genitals. So it really does represent a human form. And this is, of course, eternal. This is a beautiful piece. I just love that.
You know where I got that?
No.
At a poster shop.
Did you?
Really?
And I had it for years, and then I figured, what is it doing here? I'll donate it.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love
that's
it.
pretty cool.
Yep. Thou shalt not covet thy synagogue's Kabbalistic poster. But I was into coveting, that would be high on my list. So we have this very complex, three-dimensional unit. I mean, Jainism is, it sounds like, on one hand, kind of strange and, but it's very advanced. It's very ingenious and very complex in an intellectual way.
Question,
Yep.
do they have any kind of, and I'm trying, so many of the religions have like a flood myth and things like that. Since there was no beginning and no end, what kinds of mythology do they have?
I don't think they're really big on mythology. I mean, it's more of a cosmology than a mythology within Jainism. Yeah, I've done a class on flood myths, which would be fun. I should do that. Anybody be interested, I could just do a one-time session on flood myths and different traditions. It's kind of fun. But I don't remember a Jainist flood
I'm curious,
myth.
because almost everybody else has one.
Yeah, it is pretty universal. I haven't heard of one. I can research that a little further, but yeah, so.
Well, where's the perfection come
Wait, you gotta be patient. You gotta be
in? So
patient.
far,
All right. Well, I think the most idealistic, the most high-minded, at least from my perspective, I would say. So all that exists in the universe, they see as being divided into two general groups or classifications of stuff. One is the group that has a soul. As we mentioned before, that is like rocks and fire and creatures and people. And then there's there's the jiva, which refers to the soul. That's the kind of the word for what we would call a soul. And then there's, I think it's ajiva? Let me see. Yep, ajiva, which is, it almost sounds like like,
And the souls.
yeah, so the non-soul. And that, in the category of that, they put time, motion, space, and rest. So, it's like they see the universe as so permeated with soul, but I suppose we would talk about this as the basic forces, of time and matter and motion and space. So the physical principles that operate the universe don't have soul, they just simply are the rules and the forces by which the universe operates. And they would say that these physical principles by which the universe operates was just part of what it is. There's no creation, no almost intent behind it. It just is. It just is. So, this is seen as a path of liberation from this endless cycle of reincarnation. And that happens by purification of the soul, stopping the influx of this dark material, of expelling the acquired dark karmic matter. And they reject the idea of outside help. This is something that we can do ourselves, that we are absolutely capable of doing ourselves. We all have that potential. And they also reject hopelessness. Now that, I'm not sure how that works with the idea that you can't achieve ultimate enlightenment now because we're in this decline, this decline of the giant cosmic cycle. But I guess that means that you could still progress even if you can't absolutely exit the cycle. And there's no real sense of what happens after you achieve this, after you get out of the cycle. So, how do you do this? You do this by right faith, right knowledge, and right practice. And most of it is practice. It's how you live your life. And they live their life based on 5 great vows. Number 1, ahimsa. What was ahimsa?
Non-violence.
Absolute nonviolence. So, what do you think Jains eat?
Vegetables.
Yeah, they definitely don't eat meat.
Do they,
Vegetables, they eat vegetables if everything's living.
yeah.
Well, they have to eat, yeah, they do. I mean, they have to eat something.
I know, but that's why,
Yeah.
Well, it's the lesser harm. You know what I'm saying? I
I
mean,
mean, if you're brushing the.
purposely starving to death is probably also causing harm. So it's what can you do that causes the least harm, So you don't kill animals to eat. Like I said before, there are those, the only thing they eat is stuff that falls on the ground. But, like all other traditions, there is a sense that you also have to be somewhat practical and live in the world like you do your best. Don't we all just do our best to be good people from day to day? So they would say, okay, how can you survive in the world and do your best? Don't eat meat. Yeah, Jane.
So would they also be like raw food, or would they cook it?
I don't think they're big fans of cooking. I think there are those who are more into the raw food. And it's
Raw
like,
food vegan, basically.
yep, mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now, of course, there's a huge diversity of how, within this tradition, of how people live their lives. But the most basic commitment is do no harm, or do the least harm you can do. Now, how would the world be different if a lot of people lived by that principle of don't do violence, don't do harm? Now, if someone came to do violence to a Jain, do you think they'd resist? No, no, absolutely not. So it's like the nonviolent, you just don't do that, yeah.
Yeah, it was, when you're talking about how they deal with the fact that even vegetables, according to their teaching, have life. But what I was thinking of is one of the hardest things for people who were raised for American students within Buddhism and the years that I spent within Buddhist
Right.
teachings, is understanding that the precepts in Buddhism are not commandments, in the sense that, because we kept coming out of the Abrahamic traditions, we kept seeing them as commandments. They're not commandments. And so
They're principles.
they're principles, and so it really seems to be a different mindset, as near as I can understand it, that the mindset is different. So I thought of that as you were talking about the variation within the Jainist
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
practice, is that it's not, that if we think of them as commandments, we're going to be off track, because that's not what it is.
That's right, they're principles.
And even Buddhists will say, well, we're not allowed to kill anything, but obviously when I eat something, even a vegetable, I'm killing all of these bacteria, I'm killing all of these microscopic beings that are dying. But, so you can't ever really get there. And that seems to be a mindset that's so different from the Western Abrahamic tradition, that it really took a long time to get a kind of an emotional handle on.
Absolutely, yeah, it's not there are teachings, but it's not like a black and white thing. I mean, you do your best. You do your best, and it's really up to you how you carry out these principles. You know, it's almost like within Judaism, more like a reform. I mean, it's different, but you know, you have to figure out how this works for you. But overall, you're gonna be better off, the world's gonna be better off, the cosmos is gonna be better off, your karmic destiny is gonna be better off, the less violence you do. And that's not only physical violence, it's emotional violence, and unkindness, and animosity, and anger, and fear. It's letting go of all negative emotions and all harm. I mean, I just find that so difficult, but so compelling in a certain way, as something to almost use as a guideline in our daily decision-making. I mean, what's the harm that is going to be caused by this decision? You know, I try to drive as little as I can, because I know that driving my car is not a good thing for, you know, the poor creatures you see lying alongside the road, for global warming. So now that I'm working less, I've decided I'm gonna walk, I'm gonna ride my bike as much as I can. You know, just little things like that. You know, and I don't set myself up as an example of perfection in any way, but these are opportunities that are available to all of us, really. So, refraining from any violence. Oh, here's one of my favorite Jain stories, and some people find this just appalling. They have in Calcutta, what is Calcutta called something different now? I think it's still Calcutta. A rat sanctuary.
Oh, yes.
So rather than killing rats, they will live trap them and put them in this rat sanctuary and feed them and let them live out their natural lives.
I bet they really multiply too.
I don't know.
Actually, we.
Maybe they may segregate them or something,
No,
but.
they're-
No, actually, they reach a plateau, because we.
Oh, they would by their yeah.
Yeah.
By population. We actually did a thing with Rafi on that when we were doing. rhythms.
About the rat
With-
sanctuary?
With the rat sanctuary.
Yeah,
And the temples from that.
Yeah, there was a really good series of videos on Netflix, I think it was, and one of them had things like the rat sanctuary
But
and.
when rats reach a certain shall we call it saturation level,
Mhm.
inside a structure, the rats stop breeding,
Breeding,
unlike people.
Mhm.
And so they plateau.
It's like a population dynamic, like
It's a
in nature.
population dynamic,
Mhm.
and they influence them by bringing offerings to the rats. Architecture is just outstanding. The
Oh,
amount of
yeah.
rat sculptures, the whole thing and stuff like that. But they plateau, and so they'll bring in new.
And people will
But there's
come to
definitely a-
visit the rat
Yeah, there's
sanctuary.
actually a definite strain of rat, like a subcategory of rat that you can recognize as having been bred and raised inside the temple. They look different than the new.
Isn't that
come in.
just so interesting?
Bizarre.
Well,
Yeah.
it is, you know, and I think there's a significance in that the creature that's in some ways repulsive to most human beings, they honor as being also worthy of respect, worthy of life. They say that all creatures have, and Albert Schweitzer actually taught this too, all creatures have an equal desire to live. And they would add an equal right to have a life, and that we have no business killing anything. Obviously, they don't kill insects.
Everything except man.
Well,
Because if
they don't
man,
kill
even
people.
a flea wants to live, but a man or a person that's capable of killing somebody, knowing that he's not gonna be killed for that, has no fear of death, so he says, what the heck, I'll kill. and not have any fear.
They don't kill people.
I'm saying, not them,
Mm.
but you're saying that everything has a right to life. And I suppose if everybody was just the same, and we walked around and we hummed, or whatever we did, that'd be one thing, but it's a dynamic force of where you've got good people and bad people. With them, there's no bad people. There
No.
are bad people.
No, and if somebody takes my life, that's their bad.
Well,
Yeah,
yes
but
and
you're still
no.
dead.
I'm still dead, but, you know, I'm coming back, but
If you're a solid reincarnationist, it doesn't make any difference.
Right,
If you're
it
not
doesn't
Really
make the
bad.
slightest bit of difference if
But
you're.
then what's the difference between that and the concept of Judaism, where life is most sacred and you'll do anything to save a life, versus having bad karma come to you because you killed someone?
Well, I mean, killing somebody isn't saving a life. I mean, if I
If
kill
you can-
somebody to
But,
save.
excuse me, if you killed somebody, if someone came in here right now.
I know
to
the
try and do
principles.
that,
It's okay to kill them. I mean, that's not a
Okay.
Jainist principle.
So if everybody in here was a Jainist or whatever,
Mhm.
and somebody came in here, we'd say, well, which one you wanted to go first? You know?
But if we were all Jainists, it wouldn't make any difference.
It wouldn't
to
make
us.
any difference to us.
That's the difference.
And you buy that?
I'm not
He's
a
not,
Jainist.
he's not a Jainist.
But that's,
But a
it
Jainist-
just
I
wouldn't make.
I respect him for that, but,
Yeah.
you know,
To a Jainist, you are, by having that happen to them, by sacrificing their life to do that, so that they can maintain the principle of doing no harm, they are actually helping themselves by clearing dark matter from their soul by that very act, and are increasing their opportunity and their chance to reincarnate into a higher plane, or reach nirvana, and get off the wheel. Death is a good thing.
It's not to be
It's
sought.
not- You're not supposed to cause it. That's a different thing. Death itself
Is,
is
Is-
either a neutral or a
Yeah.
good thing, because death is the only way that you can see whether or not you have cleared enough matter to achieve a higher incarnation, to become that much closer to being able to get off the wheel and get out of the universe.
so it kind of depends on, do
So
you
your death
see
is a
this,
benefit.
this
Causing
life-
death is a detriment.
do you see this life as the ultimate and end all and be all of what is? If you do that, you're gonna have a whole different perspective on this person who, you know, yeah.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's
But then
fine.
again, but in Judaism, it's what you do here that's gonna determine your next life. You know, if you do good and you're a good person, and you do good acts of kindness, well, that's gonna help you in the next world.
Right, so,
Versus a Jainist, why not die when you're 5 years old?
no, that's not, that's,
No.
That's not what Janice is saying.
No.
And that's not what Buddhists are saying. The difference is, and it's a really tough concept, again, coming out of Abrahamic tradition, is that death in and of itself doesn't exist.
because you
And as
just
soon as you
change
think that
form.
death exists,
'Cause you
you
change
have a
form.
different problem. Then, but within those traditions, death doesn't exist, only transformation.
Yeah, you make a transition.
You make a transition.
So you don't seek it,
So while
but
you don't actively seek out a suicide, because that prevents you from being able to maximize the amount of learning, maximizing the amount of cleansing, maximizing the amount of purification of your soul you can.
And that would be causing
on this-
violence to
And that
yourself.
would be causing violence to yourself. However, the death itself is merely a transition, and you may just be stepping right back on the wheel and be born again in about 10 seconds. Here you are. And you're back,
It's not meaningful.
and you're doing it again. Death in and of itself, in these traditions, is not a giant
So
factor.
there's a death is not part of their vocabulary.
Death is not really.
Well, I mean, they
part-
realize that people are
Die.
here and they're not
Or what
here.
do
But it's death as in a transition.
It's not
Well,
a
that's-
tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, 'cause
The
what's
In the,
body-
left is
okay,
the
let's, can we
body.
get back on
Yeah,
track
sorry,
and,
yeah,
because it's
yeah.
kind of hard with,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is hard for us, I don't completely understand it. I mean, I live my life by nonviolent principles. I wouldn't kill somebody to save my own life, you know. My children's life, I don't know, God forbid I ever have to make that decision. You know what I'm saying? I never wanna make that decision, but.
Well, if I can comment, it sounds like, it sounds like they live by that principle, that permeates their lives. And it seems to me that within the certain aspects of the Abrahamic traditions, if you believe that death is only a transition into the next world, presumably into heaven if you've been a good person, it's always seemed to me that within, say, in this country, that the sense of death as a disaster is not consistent with the belief in an afterlife that's going to be better.
And really, the idea of death as a disaster is a fairly recent, I mean, it doesn't have a long history in humanity. And I think Judaism, it's become more of a thing as people have lost their spirituality, to be honest with you. I think that people just, their focus is on this life, and you know, you don't really live on except in the people's memories, and you know, I think that the Holocaust had a big impact on that, and generations of rabbis who weren't taught to teach spirituality. I think we've lost something. Anyway, so ahimsa, nonviolence, is that's really what they live by. I mean, that's number one, who they are. That is their deepest identity and principle. They also are very focused on non-falsehood, but they also see truth as relative. Now, have you ever heard the story about the blind men and the elephant? That's a Jain story. So the story is there's an elephant and there's a group of blind men, and they're all touching different parts of the elephant, and they're, you know, saying, you know, one touches the ear and says, oh, this is something like a large leaf. You know, one touches the trunk, and they touch different parts of the elephant, and they're all true, but they're only each seeing part of the truth. So they say they're focused on non-falsehood, but part of their focus on non-falsehood is knowing that nobody has the whole truth. Because our truth is always conditional on who we are, where we stand, what our perspective is. And so to imagine that any of us has the whole truth or any kind of a line on the truth is falsehood. What do you think about that?
I think that's very true.
Isn't it though? I think it's just genius. I mean, this is why I love Jainism.
I used to teach that in classes in social psychology.
Yeah.
I used the story, I didn't know it was a Jain.
Yeah, it's a Jain story with the elephant,
but
yeah.
I used that story a lot as a teacher, and I used it a lot as a therapist.
It's also used in communications. That was one of the first things I learned. And
You didn't know it was a Jainist teaching though, did you?
no, it was a communication story as far as I was concerned. I
Yep.
still refer to it.
Yep. Yeah, there's just a lot here that's really, really, really helpful. The Jains have a reputation for impeccable honesty, just absolute impeccable honesty. They would not take that which is not given. They would never do anything that, and why would you think a Jain would just be so impeccably honest? That, absolutely. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it in any way, shape, or form. The damage it would do to your soul. And I think there's some truth in that too. Is it worth it?
How different are we? If you were getting change and he gave you a 20 instead of a 10, you wouldn't give it back to the cashier and say, wait, you gave me too much?
Of course I would, but a lot of people wouldn't. Trust me.
Well, I find it a little bit hard, you know, because there are so many people within this culture who are practicing either Judaism or Christianity, and who are presumably would have every reason to be impeccable also in their honesty, since they believe that they're accountable to God. And yet you look around at all of the people who are practicing this and look at what they do. So I find it a little hard to believe that these Jainists are so impeccable as you're describing.
They're famous for their impeccable honesty. Now, is everybody perfect? I don't know. I don't know every Jain in the world.
But it's just hard because considering people's capacity for self-deception.
Well, I guess if the most important thing in the world to you is the state of your soul, that's the most important thing in the world to you, and you're gonna walk in awareness of that. It's like, before you make it. So I'll tell you a little story. Some of you know that I spent a year as a spiritual director in a prison, a men's maximum security prison,
Where?
Rush City, which is a hardcore place. I mean, the people that don't do well in Stillwater, they send to Rush City. And I developed some small group practices, some small group teaching for these people. I do what's called peace programming, and it was very successful, actually. But I gave them a question one day, and this was something that actually had happened to me. I'd gone to Target to buy some kind of a spice, and I don't even remember what it was now, but when I looked at the jar, I think it was cardamom or something, and it was just, I needed only a teeny bit of it, and it was just so expensive. I looked at it, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't wanna spend $6 for this little teeny thing of cardamom, but I needed it for a recipe, so okay, so I put it in my cart. And I got back out I was unloading my groceries, and I realized that this cardamom had fallen into the bottom of my cart, and I hadn't paid for it. So I asked these guys, what would you do in this situation? And they go, wow, I just throw it in my car. I mean, that's awesome, I got away, every single one of them. And I said, what do you think I did? And they said, well, and I said, no, actually, I went back in the store and told them, and I paid for it. And they were just like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? I mean, it just literally didn't make any sense to them. And several of them talked to me about that afterwards, that it was just a concept that would never have occurred to them, that somebody would do that, So I think these principles, I mean, we can say that, yes, we're honest and we wouldn't do that. But there's a lot of little different kinds of dishonesties in life, aren't there? It's easy to start cutting corners and.
We should have a Jainist in politics,
Yes,
as a president or Congress.
yeah.
I think we'd
They
be a
wouldn't-
lot,
they
We
wouldn't
would
last.
be a lot better.
They
we'd
wouldn't,
be a lot
Yeah.
further down the road.
they wouldn't
Yeah.
last though.
It wouldn't last.
Well, who knows? I'd like to see what happens.
That'd be great. Movie.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Good movie.
It really would. That'd be great. We should we should do a drama about that, the first Janus president. That's, yep. They also, the monks, those who are really serious, renounce any kind of sexual pleasure because they feel like that ties them to the world. But they have a big emphasis on chastity, which I don't think there's any religious tradition that says you should be promiscuous. I mean, unless they're like weird cults or something. So they focus on chastity. And I think part of that chastity is you should never tempt anyone else to unchastity. You should never use your body in a way that's tempting, to try to draw someone else's, even their attention, in an inappropriate way.
Do they live in families, or how do they live?
Well, the people, these Digambaras, no, they don't, because they're monks and nuns, and that this is their whole life is committed to meditation, and, so no, they live in groups, they live together with each other, but they don't have children, These people, yeah, they live in families. They live in families, and there's, like we said, there's a wide range in how committed people are to their tradition. I mean, I think they try to follow these principles to the best that they can within the context of real life. Very admirable. They also try to refrain from attachments to possessions, which really is coherent with all of the other teachings. I mean, you obviously need some possessions to live. Even these sky-clad people have their water gourd and their peacock feather fan. The Shvetambara, they have monks and nuns, and they also have very few possessions. They'll have a white robe, and they'll have their begging bowl, and maybe a copy of the scriptures, but, you know, absolute minimum possessions that they can live with. So simplicity is also a value, and non-attachments to possessions, which is another good value, isn't it? I mean, it's easy to get ruled by our stuff. It's one of the things I would love in my life is to have, and you know I'm not a pack rat, but I would still love to have less stuff. I'm gonna sell my house and move into a refrigerator box or something. So, yeah, non-attachment to possessions and stuff, and certainly not driving your life by the acquisition and maintenance of things. They engage in meditation. I mean, their main spiritual practice is meditation, and for those who commit their life to it, I mean, that's basically what they do. They'll get their little bit of food and spend most of the rest of the time in meditation. But also, obviously, doing good, doing kindness, doing nonviolent, loving stuff. They do have worship. They do have their temples. They recite sacred formulas. They read from their texts, which, if you ever get a chance to read some of the Jain texts, they're pretty cool. They're pretty cool. It's just the teachings of their principles. They have life cycle rituals, similar to Hindu rituals. So they have marriage ceremonies and, coming of age things and death ceremonies. I don't know what a Jain funeral is like. That would be fun to research. I really don't know a lot about their ritual practices, but they have them, and I understand they're similar to Hindu. You know, I'm thinking, do they put the dead bodies out and just leave them out in the elements? What's the group that leaves their bodies like on platforms and birds of prey come in?
Besides the Navajo?
Yeah, there's, in India, I wonder if that's the Jains. It might be, I'll have to check on that. So, another thing they teach, now I told Saul at the beginning that I'm a Jain, right? Well, obviously I'm a Jew. But they say anyone who embodies and attempts to live out these characteristics of nonviolence, love, peace, harmony, and unity is a Jain.
So
Gee,
how's
that sounds
different
like
from being-
hippies.
Huh?
How's that from being different than a Jew?
Well, I don't really see nonviolence as a,
Wait a minute, if they took away all the guns, then the Jews, if the Jews didn't have the guns, they'd be dead. If they
well,
did have
it's
the
not
guns-
a teaching within, I'm talking principles here, you know?
Are you a violent, I don't consider myself a violent person. I try to adopt all
I'm not
those
trying to
things.
make anybody defensive,
No,
you know?
but everything that you're saying, I try to be as a person.
Yeah, so
Those are universal.
you're a
to us.
Jain, you know, I mean, so it's just basically living by those principles is what they believe is important.
Are those the 5 principles?
Yep, nonviolence, love, peace, harmony, and unity. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So, I don't know, I think, I mean, and I think it's
Well,
one of
John
those,
Lennon is dead.
The part about the celibacy would be difficult.
That's the one group though.
that's the sky-clad people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not
You know,
for
if you-
everyone.
If you sat out on a corner for about 12 weeks and didn't bathe, the celibacy wouldn't be that hard.
So the non-bathing and the celibacy are probably
Like, you know,
interconnected.
Help each other out. you
But
know.
I think for those, and maybe that we would say that they are at a higher level of reincarnational status, you know, where they're just really less connected to this world. It just is not important.
And their stuff doesn't stink, huh?
It's just not
That
important.
doesn't make any difference.
So, what do you think?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's interesting, but how are you gonna go about your day? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you say, well, gee, you know, what did I accomplish? I mean, how did I make the world a better place? Okay, I didn't step on the bug, you know, I mean.
Well, that's,
Okay,
So
I
they
wouldn't,
basically, not the one group, but the other group, they basically live in the community.
Mhm.
I mean, they don't have a separate, they don't isolate
no,
themselves.
it's not cultish at all.
So it's basically a principled way of living.
That's right, it's a principled way, a highly principled way of living.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, are we saying that these principles do not exist in other traditions? No. But I mean, I've studied a lot of traditions and I've lived within a couple of them, and I don't see the same kind of emphasis on that and the same focus on it and the same commitment to it. You know, I don't remember the last time I heard a sermon about nonviolence or encouragement to not harm any life form or, you know, focusing yourself on peace and harmony and unity.
It's about another level.
It's like a different level. It's like taking those teachings and just almost isolating them from, you know, and it certainly resonates with Buddhism, I think, in terms of letting go of a lot of what binds us in this life.
Ram Dass often quoted Jainist
Mm-hmm.
teaching.
Oh, Jainist teachings have, I mean, a lot of the great spiritual teachers and leaders are very inspired by Jainist teachings. There's no,
Very Quaker-like.
yeah, it is. There's just that kind of peace and simplicity. I mean, that's another thing, you know,
Just
I
remember
don't
that
hear a lot of teaching
Just
about.
remember that Richard Nixon was a beggar.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you
was
can't judge
Robert E.
yourself
Lee.
by.
100%.
What I'm saying is that I still find it, given human beings' capacity for self-deception, which from what I've seen is something that happens in all of the religious traditions that I'm familiar with when I've
Of
known
course.
people.
Absolutely.
That I'm skeptical that all of the people, you're talking about 5 million people that
I
are
don't
mostly
think
living
anybody
by
says
these.
that, but I mean, that's what they're committed
And
to.
what they strive for. And you know what? Richard Nixon probably thought that's what he was striving for. But we have these innate things that make us human,
Yeah.
which is these traits and these characteristics that we're not perfect.
But that's what that's why this is so perfect, because it addresses those things that we are most likely to fall prey to, I think, in our life.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of the wisdom of that. And I mean, they would say, you can't worry about what anybody else is doing. It's not your business to run anybody else's life or to judge anybody else or to say, you know, this person's a bad whatever, so it's gonna make me, you know, it's just 100% about what you're doing. And that, I mean, that's not a narcissistic thing, but it's true. I mean, the only soul that we have is ours.
And we're always striving. I mean, it goes back to we are not perfect. The whole idea.
We wouldn't need this if we
Yeah.
were. We wouldn't need any sort of spiritual teaching or tradition, or we wouldn't need the 10 Commandments or love thy neighbor, or we wouldn't need any of that if we were perfect. And that's what they, you know, this whole idea of cosmic cycles, which is way beyond my ability to conceive of and probably of anybody's. But they're saying that when people are living at a higher state of harmony, they don't need this. They don't need spiritual teachers. They don't need rules, because they are that. They are embodying that naturally.
but they separate themselves from mankind, because where some of these negative things come is because we live in a community. When you're living in a community where you're working for a living, when you're living amongst people, there's gonna be those dynamics.
But you can't control that. You can just,
I understand that, and if you do something bad, okay, you ask for forgiveness 1 day a year, you ask for atonement, there's that Day of Atonement. But with them, you're just kind of separated, you're in this bubble, what are you gonna do? And so you.
I don't
They're
really
not in a bubble, they live in
see
the
that, you know,
I
it's
mean,
just,
do they live amongst,
sure.
Yes.
Well, these
yeah.
people, as I said, there's like great bankers and, you know, known for their honesty and, you know,
what, do they charge interest?
I don't know,
No,
so.
I'm just,
I mean,
I'm
there's,
just
I mean,
asking-
that's,
I'm ju, I don't know, to me, it's so far.
you could do some research on
I
that.
suppose I will.
You should, you should, you should. So it's just basically, you know, being kind, gentle, loving, nonviolent, it's not that
It's
complicated.
like all of us in every religion have these practices that we try to adhere to, and do we succeed? Well, that's why Catholics have confession. We're fallible, I mean, that's,
Well, and I guess, and I get that, it's just that it sounds like you're saying that they're different from other religions because they live more according to these principles, and I find it hard to believe, knowing our capacity as human beings for self-deception, and for thinking that what we're doing is, well, again, within the Abrahamic traditions, is what God wants us to do. And a lot of times what people think is what God wants us to do is really awful.
Well, I don't think any of this is really awful.
no, I think that she's just trying to say these are their principles, she's not trying to say that they're better than us or in any way.
I think
It's
their
just-
principles are very admirable, and Jains, I mean, all I can say, Martha, I don't know every Jain in the world, and I'm sure there's some real schmucky Jains, but I just know that they are generally highly respected and known for being really upstanding people, because if you did take these principles to heart and lived by them, I think you would be, you know, where none of us are perfect, but I think
Yeah,
it would
if we
lead
took the
you.
If we took the Ten Commandments and a good deal of the teaching of the Torah and really lived them,
So?
then we would be much better people.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
but-
so let's do it.
And make the comparison back to the Quakers, because the Quakers are highly respected. And it's genuine. I know, I have friends who are Quakers, have joined, they used to be Catholics. And they said that when Quakers go to the government listens to them. Governmental leaders will listen to them because they're respected for their knowledge and what they know and what they do. So, is every Quaker like that? No. But I would kind of relate them to this.
Well, and all we can do is, you know, do these ideas resonate with you? Maybe they don't resonate with you at all.
What, the ideas of nonviolence, peace, love, harmony, and unity?
They resonate with me,
Yeah,
and
they
I
resonate for
study
me.
this and I think, I wanna be a better person. I really do. I mean, every day I wanna bring light to the world. That's my prayer every morning is, you know, create in me a clean heart and, you know, so I can bring light and make the world better. And that's what I
Tikkun
want. Huh?
Tikkun olam.
That's exactly, which is not, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, you can't argue, well, you can argue with it, I suppose.
I'm not arguing with it. I think
But,
they're
you
wonderful
know,
principles.
And I think,
there are wonderful principles.
but you know, I
I'm just
think
a
if
little
we,
skeptical
I'm
of
just
it.
a little skeptical.
but it's only about you, Martha. You know, the whole rest of the world can be horrible and corrupt and filthy and violent. But you as a soul, you don't have to be like that.
Well, you're saying that as, that's part of your teaching.
But it'd be
Well,
like
it's
trying to
true.
ju- It'd be like trying to judge Judaism because we're not all Tzaddiks, therefore we should suspect the whole religion.
But it doesn't mean that we can't continually be striving. That doesn't mean we
And
can't,
also, I think, yes,
be
we should,
striving
we
for it.
can and we should, and I also strive to be the best person that I can be.
Yeah, me too.
I'm certainly aware of my own capacity for self-deception as well as being able to see it in other people, but I can also see it in myself, so I'll look back at things that I did that I thought were right at the time and say, how could I have done that?
Yeah,
Oh, well,
yeah.
so you let go. Don't do it again.
yeah. Yeah, so.
Thank you
So
very
now
much,
the only
that's
thing
very
I'm taking
interesting.
issue
I'm
with-
gonna share with you my favorite quote in the whole wide world, and I have lived with this for a long time, and this isn't a Jain. Oh yeah, you should shut that off or it's gonna get too long. This is from Dostoevsky. And one of the things he wrote is this: love all God's creation, both the whole and every grain of sand. Love every leaf, every ray of light. Love the animals, love the plants, love each separate thing. If you love each thing, you will perceive the mystery of God in all. And when once you perceive this, you will from then on grow every day to a fuller understanding of it, until you come at last to love the whole world with a love that will be all-embracing and universal. My last thought to give